Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Saeed. I am an industrial designer and a mechanical engineer. Not too long ago, I was a struggling industrial designer, desperately searching the web for any content and info on sketching and design. So I decided that once I got to a point where I was ready to share and give back, I would do so. So I recently started a series of sketching tutorials along with design thinking, design psychology, etc., which I'll hopefully continue to be sharing on a weekly basis. So today's sketch is the Leica Q, beautiful camera. And before we get started, I wanted to show you what supplies we'll be using. We'll be sketching on tone tan paper, one of my favorites because it's not white paper, which means all of your white highlights really pop. Same with your darks will also really pop. And not only that, but the tone tan paper is very forgiving. And you'll see why as we start to sketch. So again, tone tan paper. The next thing that we'll be using is a set of gray markers. I'm using Copics, but I also have used and still do use Prismacolors here and there. As long as you have a gradient of grays, you're good to go. Copics, Prismacolors, any marker of your choice. In this case, I am using cool gray. You can use warm gray as well. I think I prefer cool grays. Next, in the sketch, we do have a little bit of color. We've got the blue for the lens and red for the Leica logo. So I am using a Prismacolor True Blue marker. You can grab any blue of your choice. This seemed to be the most fitting. You can kind of see up top where I tested out different color choices before tossing them into the sketch, which is always good to do. I don't have the red on me, but you get the point. And one other thing I should note of is that you will want a second page that you'll be throwing away or hold one around as your bleed paper because it will bleed through to catch it so you're not ruining all the pages in your sketchbook. All right, and lastly, and very importantly, my favorite tools are the white Prismacolor Premier Colored Pencil and the black Premier Colored Pencil, both of which you'll see will really help your sketches pop off the paper. This white is super juicy and really does add to the highlights. For some more large area highlights, or if I need to have a color pop, sometimes I'll lay down a bit of white paint pen as well. And the last most important tool is the Papermate Flare. This is a pen that you should be able to pick up anywhere from even CVS to wherever, and it's a great felt tip pen that we'll be using to outline a lot of our stuff. Without further ado, let's get started.
All right, so I'm starting off by checking out my reference image, looking at where it will fit view-wise, and I'm tossing down some basic building blocks that will define the shape of the camera. So you can, as you can imagine, you've got a stretched rectangular segment and a long cylinder for the lens. So now that those are down, I'm coming back through and adding small fillets, any rounds that will appear and will be significant. And everything I'm doing right now, I'm doing with a C2 very light gray marker. As you'll see as the sketch progresses, that marker will really fade away and become insignificant towards the end. And you might be thinking, oh, it's tough to commit with a marker right away instead of, just pencil and eraser. But it really helps to toss down these lines confidently at first. So you can come back through, as I'm doing now, with a felt tip pen to really start committing to those. It's a lot easier to commit to those lines once you have a guide, which again, we did in a light marker. Coming through and outlining all of the important features, such as that Leica logo, places where there's a material break, such as that area, and now tossing down some ellipses. Ellipses are something I still need to work on. I'm not too happy with the ones from this sketch, but it's practice. It's good practice for me, as hopefully it will be for you. I've got the several dials, and okay, now we're coming back through with some darker markers. Remember always to start light. So I started with about a C6 to lay down the lightest area, and I'm coming back through to add the darker segments. You'll see shortly that I'll switch up the marker and go darker and darker and darker. There we go. And what we're basically doing, I mentioned earlier that this paper is super forgiving because you really just need a base layer of color. In our case, it's easy because most of this camera is grays. Once you have a base layer of color, it doesn't matter if your little details get lost because we'll bring them back with those colored pencils. Adding some of that shading to the lens now, and remember, it's always great to have reference images or look at other sketches, look at objects in real life and try to mimic them, because the more you mimic reflections and complex shadows, the more you'll start to adapt it as a natural part of your sketching technique. And you'll start to know where different shadows go over time. Again, I'm coming through now with some darker markers to really fill in the areas and the basic colors of the sketch. And again, we'll come back through with colored pencil to really make things pop. As of now, everything's just really subtle shades of gray. Nothing really pops just yet, but you need that base layer. Coming through with the red, adding a spot for that Leica logo, adding a bit more contrast. The more contrast you add, the more your sketch will pop. Now's when the magic happens. Make sure that white colored pencil is sharp. Always sharp. I can't emphasize that enough. It's how you get the tiny details and make sure your sketches look crisp. It shows if your, colored pencils are not sharp, if they're blunt. Got that Leica logo in, really punching the contrast again. I think I grabbed that black colored pencil for a second, but this is where you can really punch the contrast on those reflections, highlights, even that little chrome segment on the top right there, that white really makes it pop. Coming back through with the dark black colored pencil to, again, add more contrast. The more contrast you have, again, the more contrast you have, the more your sketch will pop, the more lifelike it'll look. Now for the tiny details, I know it was one shade of gray around that lens, but you can see just by alternating the black and white stripes, which I just did with the colored pencil, it almost adds ridges, lifelike ridges to that focus ring. With the sharp colored pencil, again, coming through with the tiny details, the text, the numbering, the Leica logo. And there are two different materials, the aluminum or metallic outer shell and a rubberized inner segment that provides, more grip. And I differentiated those two with the black colored pencil. Now the lens is a little tricky. Glass is always a tricky element to work with. The more you play with it, the more you'll adapt and become comfortable and confident with it. But you've got different shades of blue here reflecting in different ways, and I'm using the reference image here to even help myself in this case. For the textured grip, I'm coming through with a sharp white colored pencil and just tossing in those lines, and you can see how that contrasts with the flat gray we had before. Now you've got a texture. Don't forget the shadow, because to complete your sketch, no objects are ever floating in the air, right? They're always on a surface, so figure out where your light's coming from, in this case behind the top backside of the camera, and drop a shadow. I used a colored pencil to darken that shadow again. Toss in a title, and we're good.
Alrighty, and that concludes our tutorial. Thanks so much for joining this week. If you'd like to follow more of my sketches, click here to follow my Instagram and check out my design firm along with all of my other projects here, where I outline a lot of other great sketches. Make sure you check out the last week's video, which I'll link below. And hopefully I'll see you at the next one. Thanks.